Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is John. A few months ago in April, I made a long video, something like 40 minutes long, with 20 or 25 new and upcoming books from university presses. Two of my favorite university presses, actually, Princeton University Press and the University of Chicago Press. And these two wonderful presses offer me things and send me things a little bit faster than sometimes I'm in the mood to make videos, and to them I should apologize for that. But going forward, I want to make slightly shorter videos that show 10 books apiece, and I'll try to make one in July, one in August, and one in September, because I think in October, fall 2026 books start coming out, and I'll start getting another spate of them, in which case I'll have more things to show. So here are 10 books that came out. These aren't super recent. Some are from the fall of 2025, some are from spring of 2026. But just in case you're not familiar with my reading interests, I read a lot of history, but I also read things that sort of are history adjacent, humanities adjacent, philosophy. I read a little bit of literary criticism. I read a little bit of sociology. I read literary biographies. These books will give you sort of a cumulative taste of what I like. Like I said, here are 10. With one little caveat, there are two books here from another press, from the University of California Press. And the first book is one of those. They have come out with a new translation of maybe the great Latin poem, depending on who you ask. This is Ovid's Metamorphoses. This is a squat little, almost pocketbook sized version of Ovid's Metamorphoses. This is a new translation by Siluk Susi, or Susi. And this is the Latin epic poem that tells you all about, or is all about, change and transformation. You get the stories, most of the stories from Greek and Roman myth that you know of. Apollo, Daphne, Narcissus, Pygmalion, Orpheus, Eurydice, all of the names that you are familiar with. And the great thing about this, I think, at least, so this much of the book, the first 400 pages exactly, are the 15 books, this part, are the 15 books of the Metamorphoses. And then the next 660 pages are commentary, as well as a glossary of names and places, and an appendix. So you get copious commentary. All of this is commentary. So as long as you don't mind flipping back and forth, and you're interested in a new translation of the Metamorphoses, the University of California has one. Next up is, I'm just waiting for these to topple over because they're all stacked up like this. So if you hear something fall in the background, that's what it was. This is from the University of Chicago. And this is from Heinrich Meyer, the author. And the book is called On the Happiness of the Philosophic Life, Reflections on Rousseau's Reveries. Now, this is an interpretation, not a translation, but an interpretation of Rousseau's late work called Reveries of a Solitary Walker, in which Heinrich Meyer argues that Rousseau thought we found our highest selves, our ultimate satisfaction, in the solitary, reflective withdrawal from politics and from social life, rather than engaging with other people. And this is especially interesting if you are familiar with or knowledgeable about the arc of Rousseau's thought, because Rousseau's earlier works, like Emile and the Social Contract, and other books too, were all about topics like moral formation and how to live a civic life or engage in civic life and political legitimacy, all of which you do in the company of other people. So this is kind of an essay on a book that Rousseau wrote that is kind of a sea change for how he thought in his later years. So, Heinrich Meyer's On the Happiness of the Philosophic Life, Reflections on Rousseau's Reveries. And this is the second and the last University of California Press book. I was elated to see this because you don't really see a lot of African history that is pre-20th century. You see a lot of African history that is about colonialization, decolonialization, very contemporary history since, the 70s or 80s. But you don't see anything, you don't see a lot before that. And this is, that. This is called, let me scroll up a little bit, this is called Great Kingdoms of Africa. And so we have it's edited by John Parker and forward by David Adjaye. So this is basically a collection of essays by different authors, all about different regions, empires, governments in Africa during roughly the Middle Ages. So this is not an exhaustive list by any stretch, but you have ancient Egypt, which of course is not in the Middle Ages, but you also have Ghana, Mali, the Songhai, Great Zimbabwe, the Congo with a K. Before it started to be spelled with a C, it was with a K, and Ethiopia. But there are other chapters in here too. There's one on the Zulu Kingdom. There's one on Buganda. There's one on the Yoruba and Benin Kingdoms. There's one of the Sudanic empires. Anyway, a great book to fill in some gaps if you don't know much about what you would consider, or maybe, pre-20th century African kingdoms and empires. Next up is something I was really, really interested in because it looks kind of like maybe a one-stop shop for this author. Not one of these, shorter literary biographies that you see sometimes, but kind of a big 750-page book, notes and index and everything included. This is from Princeton University Press, and it is their relatively new biography of Goethe. Goethe, A Life in Ideas by Matthew Bell. And don't really have too much to say about this. It kind of speaks for itself, but it appears to be, I've peeked inside a little bit, looks to be an intellectual biography, a biography of ideas, and looks across his poetry, his scientific work, like his color theory, drama, the poetry, aesthetics, science, all the topics he wrote about, and just kind of discusses them in tandem with his life. Really, really sort of the seminal figure of German Romanticism, at least as far as I'm concerned. So I was very interested in reading this and might read it for quarter 3 of Historathon, might read it for quarter 4 of Historathon, because he bridges both of them. But yes, a great new biography of Goethe from Princeton University Press, if you are interested in him. We're going to topple, aren't we? Yeah, we are. All right. Trying to prevent the inevitable over here. All right, and here's another biography, not of a literary figure, but of a great sort of enlightenment. Well, she gets a lot of hype for being an Enlightenment monarch, but this is kind of a revisionist biography in the sense that it makes the argument that her, and let me just tell you who it is before, not trying to tease you here. We're talking about Maria Theresa, the Habsburg Empress in her time, by Barbara Stolberg-Grillinger. Stolberg-Grillinger also wrote a very, very, very short 150-page history of the Holy Roman Empire, which I've also reviewed on my channel. If you just search her name, make sure and get the hyphen in there, will come up if you look for it. But this is not short at all, and it looks even bigger than it appears to be because it is over 1,000 pages long. So, like I said, she gets a reputation for being an Enlightenment monarch, but this kind of looks at her as hammering down on Catholic piety and being an enforcer of dynastic obligation and being a lot more conservative and maybe even borderline authoritarian than she's usually thought of as being. Of course, she was the Holy Roman Empress, so she is going to be a bit of an enforcer. I think they all were, but it's interesting to maybe get a bit of a counterbalanced view of what her reign was all about. Maria Theresa, the Habsburg Empress in her time, by Barbara Stolberg-Grillinger. Next is a book I have actually already read. I read it on vacation a few weeks ago, and I absolutely loved it. I will post a review of it very soon. This is a little biography. Packs a punch. It's really great. It's from the University of Chicago. And this is Arthur Schopenhauer, The Life and Thought of Philosophy's Greatest Pessimist by David Bather Woods. And this book does a spectacular job of taking Schopenhauer's life, the relevant biographical details, and dovetailing them just perfectly into aspects of Schopenhauer's thought. So, what he thought about life, what he thought about death, what he thought about metaphysics and ethics and aesthetics, the whole range of categories, and how he was inspired to think about these things from what happened to him in his life. Things like his, uneasy relationship with his parents. His mother was a famous literary personality and novelist in her own time. And for a lot of Schopenhauer's life, he thought that she was going to go down being the Schopenhauer that everyone remembered. Up until about the last 10 or 15 years of his life, no one knew who he was. And he always thought that his mother would be the one that was still read long after they were all dead. But this is a good little book, and don't let the length fool you. It's jam-packed of really fascinating information about his life and about his thought. You might want to leave this and go read The World as a Will and Representation when you're all done. I did. So this is Arthur Schopenhauer, The Life and Thought of Philosophy's Greatest Pessimist by David Bather Woods. Next up is someone who doesn't get nearly as much billing as Schopenhauer does, but he belonged to the previous century and was from another country, but I'm glad someone actually put out a book on him. I know a little bit about him. I'm familiar with him through Liberty Fund, which is a wonderful, another publisher you can go get a couple of this guy's books from. But his name was Anthony Ashley Cooper, but you might know him better as the third Earl of Shaftesbury. And there he is on the cover. And this is A Philosophy of Beauty. Shaftesbury on Nature, Virtue, and Art by Michael B. Gill. And Shaftesbury is kind of a sentimental ethicist, a virtue ethicist, kind of, not in the Aristotelian sense, but thinks that seeing rightly and acting well are kind of two sides of the philosophical coin. I would have to go back and read this book and say something more intelligent and coherent about it after I've actually read it. But it looks to be mostly a sort of a comprehensive assessment of the Earl of Shaftesbury's philosophical thought. So, if you're interested in that, and who wouldn't be, right? Here you go. From Princeton University Press, by the way. Okay. So 3 more books to go. This is another short little squat book from Princeton. And it is called Who Really Wrote the Bible? The Story of the Scribes by William M. Schniedewind, or Schniedewind. And this, I've looked inside of it. It looks to be kind of on the more scholarly monograph side of things, kind of academic, but argues that the books of the Hebrew Bible, which Christians call the Old Testament, emerged gradually alongside the rise of literacy and state administration in ancient Israel and Judah from the 8th century BC onwards. Instead of being written by one person or done in one central late compilation, like sometimes it's thought that Moses wrote large chunks of the Hebrew Bible. I don't think this is a very controversial thesis or opinion for people who are familiar with the textual criticism of the Hebrew Bible. But I will say more when I read it, and we'll eventually talk about it one of these days. But I thought it was pretty common knowledge that the Hebrew Bible was written just like the New Testament was written by a number of people, but I'll see what it says. Next up is a book that kind of itches the scratch for historiography, not so much history. And it is Historiography of the Enlightenment. This is from the University of Chicago, again. And this is The Legacy of the Enlightenment, Ambivalences of Modernity by Antoine Littlety. Translated by C. John Delogu. And this, I've just sort of looked through it very quickly. This is not a history of the Enlightenment or its ideas or the science or scientific method or anything like that. This is it loosely interconnected essays, or does it have a sort of a standalone? I think it's standalone. It is about how the Enlightenment has been remembered and appropriated and interpreted since, the 250 years or so since it ended. So the emphasis here is on the word legacy, right? It's not a history of the Enlightenment, it's a historiographical interpretations of it. So something like that interests you, this would be great for Q3 of Historathon, because one of the things we're looking at is the Enlightenment. And last but not least is a book of social science. I love sociology, and I wish I would have had more of a chance to learn more about it when I was in school. But now I'm playing catch up, as inevitably any curious person is. And this is from the University of Chicago. It is their new book by Paul L. Ryan. It's called Adventures in the Archaic, Primitivism, Degrowth, and the French Social Sciences from, let me get the years there, I can't read them, 1945 to 1975. And this is kind of an overview of the work of 4 post-war French sociologists, 2 of whom you will probably know and the other 2 you may not. The 2 you may know are Georges Bataille and Mircea Eliade, the sociologist of shamanism and religion. And the other 2 are Henri Lefebvre and Georges Devereux. And it looks at how they imagined categories like the archaic and the primitive as resources for critiquing very modern problems like capitalist society and industrial expansion and consumerist culture. So you can see this representation of old cave paintings being using concepts of the ancient, of the old, of the primitive to critique something that is happening around you and is very, very contemporary. It's an interesting approach, but it sounded really interesting, especially since I really love Mircea Eliade, and I think he's the only one. Oh, I've read some Bataille before. I read I've even reviewed on this channel a couple of books by him, but this is all about that concept of critiquing the contemporary and the modern after World War II in the light of the archaic and the primitive. Adventures in the Archaic by Paul L. Ryan. Excuse me, Ryan L. Allen. Where did I get Paul from? I have no idea. But those are 10 books, 8 of which are from Princeton University Press and University of Chicago Press, and 2 from the University of California Press. If you see anything you like, let me know. And if you see anything you're interested in hearing me talk about in more of a fully fleshed out review, also let me know that too. And I will see if I can prioritize or reviews, shuffle around books I'm interested in, and get you some more information. Otherwise, I will see you later with another review or another video about books, and I will talk to you later. Bye.